I think there's a lot the government can do better for the community. I think firstly it starts with the government acknowledging that the 26th of January was the beginning of the invasion of Australia by people from Britain, basically, and to continue having a celebration of Australian identity on this day is an outrageous concept. It is equivalent to celebrating, the foundation of Germany on the beginning of the Holocaust. It's because the genocides in Australia against Aboriginal people were of that scale.
Just change this for another day so we can all get along and, yes, help one another and support one another.
The government can listen to the community, and I think asking them is the best thing the government can do.
They need to start listening to them and more respect. I think white culture should learn from Aboriginal culture the good things that they have to offer.
To acknowledge our culture more, our history more, and to be on mainstream more.
There's a few things I think they have to really put in effort to support regional communities. They have to stop taking Aboriginal children away from their families and allow them to be raised in community. Too many Aboriginal kids are being replaced in white families and they're losing their connection to culture. Also, the Australian government has to put money towards protecting language and protecting culture.
And we also need Aboriginal languages to be taught in schools around Australia. And that is not done other than in the Northern Territory, but in the Northern Territory that is starting to be has been removed the last number of years, or at least they've stopped teaching language in people's mother tongue, if it's Aboriginal language, and are teaching people in English and then letting people talk in their mother tongue later, whereas language teachers tell us that you need to learn in your mother tongue and then introduce other languages.
When it comes to, say, passing laws on judgment on Aboriginal people, they shouldn't necessarily be giving them the most specific sort of help out towards there. I mean, everyone is responsible for their own actions, but then again, what I find really disgusting is the fact that whenever Aboriginal people or Torres Strait Islanders are faced within court systems, they're just not necessarily treated fairly, and they're subjected to either being put in private prisons, which have utterly terrible conditions where they'll either overdose on drugs or commit suicide, and the state should be taking care of that where those conditions don't actually exist for that certain sort of a way, and they should be taking care of people within a more common sense of human rights and justice in that certain sort of a way. And I think it's absolutely disgusting that Aboriginal people are treated in that sort of way in our court systems.
It would be to change the justice system specifically because Indigenous people are overrepresented, especially within the justice system, but also with suicide statistics, mental health statistics, substance abuse statistics. And I think that it all goes back to changing the justice system and the way that it treats its Indigenous people, especially down to even just each police officer thinking about the way that they might have a bias against Indigenous people. So I think it all starts there with justice and law.
They should change racism throughout Australia because it seems to be a big problem to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
What the government can do better is to support our call to abolish the law for public drunkenness. They can also do better in implementing those recommendations that was over nearly 30 years ago for black deaths in custody.
Have a voice in Parliament.
To give Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders a voice in Parliament and in the government.
And also land rights Aboriginal people have to be able to profit from the land that is rightfully theirs, that has always been theirs. The Australian government has taken that away from them, and they deserve some self-sustainability by being able to profit from the land. Also, treaties need to happen in order to create self-determination and for Aboriginal people to be able to speak on what they need from the government and be listened to directly. That's in those treaties. Also, separate bodies that operate alongside government, to make sure that policies don't happen that go against the will of the land and what's best for the land and what's best for Aboriginal people.
Because at the moment we have elderly Aboriginal people who don't go to the doctor because they'll only go to an Aboriginal doctor, and so they miss out on health care until there's an emergency and they're carted off to hospital. And so we need a whole lot of Aboriginal services in different areas, and we need to support Aboriginal people living in remote areas on their country. That's really important.
So the government definitely can do a lot of things better, like when it comes to a lot of the reforms that were being discussed today, like prisons and economic reform. But I think the central point of this rally, being at an Aboriginal sovereignty rally, is that it's not necessarily about asking the Australian state to do better, it's about criticising the very functioning existence of the Australian state as a colonial, invading, illegitimate terrorist occupation. Yeah? It's saying that Aboriginal people, First Nations people, which I'll be very clear that I'm not one of that community. I'm an Indian Fijian settler on this land. Want self-determination, land rights and economic independence as a means to their freedom.